Good morning and welcome to St James's Church in Laugharne, or it's another Welsh place I can't pronounce. Today we're here to visit the final resting place of a poet and playwright. Probably the best poet and playwright that Wales has ever had, and that is Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas had various plays, even up in London they were doing his plays, and obviously he's known for his poetry. But it's another beautiful place in Wales. Though I'm not liking these roads and the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits everywhere. But anyway, what I'll do, I'll spin you around. We'll have a look around this lovely churchyard. I'll try and get a bit of a view in the church while I tell you a little bit about Dylan Thomas.
Dylan Thomas was born on the 27th of October 1914 in Swansea, the son of Florence Hannah née Williams, a seamstress, and David John Jack Thomas, a teacher. Dylan had one sibling, Nancy, who was 8 years his senior. At the 1921 census, Nancy and Dylan are noted as speaking both Welsh and English. Their parents were also bilingual in English and Welsh, and Jack Thomas taught Welsh at evening classes. There are 3 accounts from the 1940s of Dylan singing Welsh hymns and songs, and of him speaking a little Welsh. The red brick semi-detached house in which Thomas was born and lived until he was 23 had been bought by his parents a few months before his birth. Thomas has written a number of accounts of his childhood growing up in Swansea, and there are also the accounts available by those who knew him as a young child. He wrote several poems about his childhood and early teenage years, including Once It Was the Colour of Saying and The Hunchback in the Park, as well as short stories such as The Fight and A Child's Christmas in Wales. Thomas had bronchitis and asthma in his childhood and struggled with these throughout his life. He was indulged by his mother, Florence, and enjoyed being mollycoddled, a trait he carried into adulthood, becoming skilled in gaining attention and sympathy. Thomas's formal education began at Mrs. Hull's Dame School, a private school a few streets away from his home. In October 1925, Thomas enrolled at Swansea Grammar School for Boys in Mount Pleasant, where his father taught English. During his final school years, he began writing poetry in notebooks. In June 1928, he won the school's mile race, held at St Helens Ground. He carried a newspaper photograph of his victory with him until his death. In 1931, when he was 16, Thomas left school to become a reporter for the South Wales Daily Post, where he remained for some 18 months. After leaving the newspaper, he continued to work as a freelance journalist for several years, during which time he remained living at home and continued to add to his notebooks, amassing 200 poems in 4 books between 1930 and 1934. Of the 90 poems he published, half were written during these years. The stage was also an important part of Thomas's life from 1929 to 1934, as an actor, writer, producer and set painter. He took part in productions at Swansea Grammar School and with the YMCA Junior Players and the Little Theatre, which was based in the Mumbles. It was also a tour in company that took part in drama competitions and festivals around South Wales. The Shakespearean actor John Laurie, who had worked with Thomas on both stage and radio, thought that Thomas would have loved to have been an actor, and had he chosen to do so, would have been the first poet-dramatist since Shakespeare. Thomas was a teenager when many of the poems for which he became famous were published, and Death Shall Have No Dominion, Before I Knocked, and The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives a Flower among them. In early 1936, Thomas met Caitlin McNamara, a 22-year-old dancer of Irish and French Quaker descent. She had run away from home, intent on making a career in dance, and aged 18 joined the chorus line at the London Palladium. Introduced by Augustus John, Caitlin's lover, they met in the Wheatsheaf pub in Rathbone Place in London's West End. Laying his head in her lap, a drunken Thomas proposed. They married at the Register Office in Penzance, Cornwall on the 11th of July 1937. By late September 1945, the Thomases had left Wales and were living with various friends in London. The publication of Deaths and Entrances in February 1946 was a major turning point for Thomas. Poet and critic Walter J. Turner commented in The Spectator, "This book alone, in my opinion, ranks him as a major poet." In May 1949, Thomas and his family moved to his final home, the Boathouse in Laugharne, purchased for him by Margaret Taylor. Thomas acquired a garage 100 yards from his house on a cliff ledge which he turned into his writing shed, and where he wrote several of his most acclaimed poems. He also rented Pelican House opposite his regular drinking den, Brown's Hotel, for his parents, who lived there from 1949 until 1953. American poet John Brennan invited Thomas to New York, where in 1953 they embarked on a lucrative 3-month tour of art centers and campuses. This was the first of 3 very lucrative tours of New York. Thomas set off on his 4th and ultimately last tour of New York on the 9th of October 1953. While waiting in London before his flight, he stayed with comedian Harry Locke and worked on Undermilk Wood. Locke noted that Thomas was having trouble with his chest, terrible coughing fits that made him go purple in the face. He was also using an inhaler to help with his breathing. There were reports too that Thomas was also having blackouts. Thomas arrived in New York on the 20th of October 1953 to undertake further performances of Undermilk Wood. He was met by John Brennan's assistant, Liz Rytell. She met Thomas at the airport and was shocked by his appearance. He looked pale, delicate and shaky, not his usual robust self. On 24th of October, Rytell took Thomas to see her doctor, who administered cortisone injections, and Thomas made it through the first performance, but collapsed immediately after. At midnight on 5th of November, Thomas's breathing became more difficult and his face turned blue. He was admitted to the emergency ward at St Vincent's Hospital at 1:58 a.m. It is now believed that Thomas had been suffering from bronchitis, pneumonia, emphysema and asthma before his admission to St Vincent's. In their 2004 paper, Death by Neglect, D.N. Thomas and former GP Principal Simon Barton disclosed that Thomas was found to have pneumonia when he was admitted to hospital in a coma. Thomas died at noon on the 9th of November, having never recovered from his coma. A nurse and poet, John Berryman, were present with him at the time of his death. His body was brought back to Wales for burial in the village churchyard. The funeral took place on the 24th of November at St Martin's Church in Laugharne, which is where we are today.
Well, that is all the information I could get on Dylan Thomas. It's absolutely beautiful here. All you can hear is birds, nothing else. Nothing. What a beautiful place to be buried. On the side of a hill in a valley. Beautiful. Anyway, Dylan Thomas's cross, it's only a wooden cross, is here to my left. So I'll spin you around and we'll go and have a look at it together. Well, it's just over here. It's a white cross and apparently they replace it about every 10 years or so, put a new one in. But it's always the same design. And here it is. In loving memory of Caitlin Thomas, born December 8th, 1913, died August the 1st, 1994. R.I.P. If you go around to this side, in memory of Dylan Thomas, born October the 27th, 1914, died November the 9th, 1953. Rest in peace. That is the final resting place of Dylan Thomas. Well, that was the final resting place of Dylan Thomas. Now, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, then maybe consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you will be notified whenever I upload a new video. Well, these are treacherous on hillsides. Anyway, that's it. Me, Darren, from St James's Church in Laugharne, or whatever the place is called. I will see you on the next one. So bye-bye for now.